The story begins in 2004, introducing Adnan and his father. One evening, Adnan's father gifts him a watch, saying, "Now you can check the time on your watch and reach school on time." That night, after falling asleep, the next morning, Adnan's mother wakes him and his sister Maya. Both Adnan and Maya attend the same school, but Adnan's classes start earlier, so he leaves the house before her. On his way to school, an unexpected encounter changes everything. A man suddenly appears before Adnan and harms him fatally. A woman named Gunilla witnesses the event and tries to stop the man. However, he turns on her and injures her fatally as well. Just then, another woman, Anna, arrives at the scene. As the man harms Gunilla, Anna sees everything but can only watch helplessly. Moments later, the police arrive and begin their investigation. Meanwhile, Maya, on her way to school, unknowingly walks past the incident. She notices one of her brother's toys lying nearby. Concerned and puzzled, she hurries to school, only to discover that her brother hasn't arrived yet. The realization strikes her. The boy who was harmed must be her brother Adnan. The scene shifts to a police officer named John. A brief glimpse into John's life reveals that his wife is pregnant, and the couple is overjoyed at the thought of welcoming their first child. However, John's happiness is interrupted when he receives a call about the incident. Duty calls, and John heads to investigate what has happened to Adnan and Gunilla. At the scene, the investigators find the man's weapon, which was used to harm both individuals. The police question people in the vicinity, eventually reaching Gunilla's husband to deliver the tragic news of her loss. After Maya returned home, she was in a terrible state, crying uncontrollably. Meanwhile, John began questioning Anna, who was taken into custody as the only witness to the crime. As a witness, Anna recounted everything she had seen at the scene. However, when it came to describing the killer's face, Anna struggled. She said, "I saw the killer's face with my own eyes, but I don't know why I can't remember it." John reassured her, saying, "It's okay. Take your time to remember. We'll question you again later." Elsewhere, Gunilla's husband learned about the incident. Overwhelmed with grief, he became deeply distressed. He called his son to inform him of the tragic news. A short while later, John visited Gunilla's husband to speak with him. John explained, "Your wife was trying to save the child. That's why, unfortunately, she also became a victim. I need to know, did Gunilla have any enemies or conflicts with anyone?" Gunilla's husband replied, "No, she was a teacher. Her only work was teaching children. Why would anyone have a problem with her?" Meanwhile, we see Adnan's family gathering at the spot where he lost his life. They place some of his belongings there to honor his memory and grieve together. After some time, John also visited Adnan's family. He questioned them, asking, "Did you have any conflicts or issues with anyone recently?" Adnan's parents denied it, saying, "No, we haven't had any arguments or disputes with anyone." John then showed them a photograph of Gunilla and asked, "Do you know this woman? She's the one who tried to save your son." Looking at the photo, Adnan's parents replied, "No, we don't know her." The tragic incident had spread fear among the residents of the area. Many families, worried for their children's safety, stopped sending them to school or letting them go outside. The atmosphere was tense as the killer was still at large. The police, however, had found some key pieces of evidence: the killer's knife and a blue cap. Upon testing the DNA on the knife, they discovered that it belonged to the killer, which meant they could potentially identify him through DNA sample. The scene shifts to a football field where a group of children are playing. Here, we're introduced to a boy named Antti, who seems short-tempered. Frustrated with his inability to play football properly, he storms off the field. His coach Marcus follows him and tries to talk to him, saying, "If there's something bothering you, you can talk to me. I've noticed that you haven't been practicing properly for days. What's wrong?" Antti, however, brushes it off and replies, "I'm fine. You don't need to worry about me." With that, he walks away, leaving Marcus concerned. Next, we see Anna, who is walking to work along the same route where the crime had occurred. As she passes the crime scene, memories of that day flood her mind. She vividly recalls how the killer, after attacking Gunilla, ran right past her. Despite seeing the killer's face that day, she still struggles to remember what he looked like. The tension deepens as Anna wrestles with her memory, knowing that her recollection might be the key to identifying the killer and bringing justice to the victims. In recent days, John had been so consumed by the investigation that he wasn't able to spend time with his pregnant wife. Despite his relentless efforts, the investigation wasn't yielding any solid leads. The only promising avenue left was the DNA sample recovered from the knife, which could potentially identify the killer. However, to make progress, the police needed DNA samples from individuals known for violent behavior or criminal records, particularly those with a history of using weapons like knives. The police summoned several individuals to the station, people infamous for brawls and violence, and collected their DNA samples. They also interrogated them thoroughly. However, even after all this effort, the DNA samples didn't match the killers, leaving the investigation at a frustrating standstill. One day, Anna went to the mall to run some errands. While there, she unexpectedly spotted Ante. As soon as Ante noticed Anna, He appeared visibly nervous and quickly left the area. Sensing something suspicious, Anna followed him outside, trying to keep up, but she eventually lost track of him. This fleeting yet unsettling encounter left Anna even more determined to recall the face of the killer and figure out why Auntie's reaction felt so out of place. Meanwhile, the mystery deepened, leaving John and his team grasping for new leads in the increasingly complex case. John eventually came across all of Adnan's belongings that had been left at the crime scene. After carefully examining them for clues, he decided to return the items to Adnan's parents. When John handed over the belongings, Adnan's parents became deeply emotional. Adnan's father, with tears in his eyes, pleaded, "Please help us." John reassured them, saying, "I promise I will find the person who took your son's life." During his research into investigative techniques, John remembered something about hypnosis being used to uncover hidden memories. Intrigued by the idea, he approached Anna, explaining that hypnosis might help her recall details about the killer. Anna, eager to assist the police in finding the culprit, agreed to try it. John took Anna to a skilled hypnotist, a woman experienced in using hypnosis for investigative purposes. Under hypnosis, Anna's body remained in the room, but her mind returned to the crime scene. As she relived the incident, Anna described everything she could see. This process enabled the team to create a partial sketch of the killer's face. Though incomplete, it was the first tangible lead they had. John felt a glimmer of hope. At least they now had something to work with. Weeks had passed since the tragic incident, and the case had become a hot topic among reporters. They relentlessly questioned John, asking, "Where is the killer? Why hasn't the case been solved yet?" John, bearing the weight of the responsibility, responded confidently, "We have a partial sketch of the killer. My team and I are working tirelessly, and I assure you, we'll find him soon." With this renewed sense of determination, John and his team continued to pursue justice for Adnan and Gunilla, knowing that time was of the essence. Once again, the story shifts to the football team. It is revealed that Ante hadn't been attending training for several days. He had been staying at home, withdrawn and unresponsive. Concerned about his absence, the coach, Marcus, decided to visit him at his house. When Marcus asked Ante, "Why haven't you been coming to training?" Ante simply replied, "I just don't feel like it." The coach pressed further, saying, "Last winter, when our entire team went to the police station for DNA testing, you didn't go. Why didn't you? I need to know." Marcus had heard about the double murder and suspected a connection, which prompted his questions. However, when Ante heard this, he became visibly angry and yelled at his coach, forcing him to leave the house. Marcus left, shaken but increasingly suspicious of Ante's behavior. Meanwhile, nearly a year had passed since the tragedy, yet the killer's identity remained a mystery. The case seemed to grow colder with each passing day. During this time, John learned that Adnan's parents were preparing to leave their home and move elsewhere. Adnan's father explained, "We can't stay here any longer. Every corner of this house reminds us of our son. It's just too painful. We need a fresh start somewhere far away." Before leaving, Adnan's father said to John, "If you find anything about the killer, please let us know. We want justice for our son, even if we're not here." This emotional farewell left John more determined than ever to uncover the truth and bring closure to Adnan's grieving family. During this time, we learn that John and his wife were blessed with a baby boy, whom they named Henry. Despite this joyful milestone, John couldn't let go of Adnan's unsolved murder case. His determination to solve it drove him to spend countless nights at the police station, leaving his wife and child at home. As years passed, John's obsession with the case deepened. He poured himself into the investigation, trying every possible lead to find the killer. However, this relentless pursuit came at a cost. He spent very little time with his family. One day, his wife, frustrated by his absence and the strain on their relationship, confronted him. "I can't do this anymore, John," she said. "I'm going to my parents' house and I'm taking Henry with me. You can focus on your work without worrying about us." John pleaded with her to stay, promising to change, but she had made up her mind. Heartbroken, John watched as his wife and child walked out of his life. His relentless focus on the case had cost him his family. Despite the years slipping by, John refused to give up. By now it was 2020, 16 years since the tragedy in 2004. Adnan's family had moved on, starting a new life far away. However, John remained fixated on the case, determined to find justice for Adnan and Gunilla. His dedication earned him both admiration and criticism. Some praised his commitment, while others ridiculed him, calling his efforts futile. One day, Miguel, a colleague from the police force, approached John. "I just spoke to the senior officers," Miguel said. "They've decided not to allocate more time to this case. You've got 2 weeks, John. If nothing comes of it, we'll have to close the file and move on to other cases." John, steadfast as ever, responded, "Fine, I'll take those 2 weeks. Let's see what we can uncover." With the clock ticking, John poured all his energy into the investigation, determined to make those final days count and hoping for a breakthrough that would bring justice at last. The story takes a poignant turn as we are introduced to John's son, Henry, who was now a teenager. 16 years have passed, and though John remained consumed by the case, he still made efforts to visit Henry occasionally. One day, during his research, John learned about a man named Ben, a DNA genealogist renowned for solving a 44-year-old cold case using advanced DNA mapping techniques. Intrigued and hopeful, John decided to approach Ben, believing he might be able to identify Adnan's killer through the DNA sample recovered from the knife. John met with Ben and explained the entire case. Fortunately, the killer's DNA sample was still intact. Ben agreed to help, but he explained that the process wouldn't be straightforward. Using the DNA sample, Ben would map potential genetic matches, tracing the lineage to find individuals who shared significant DNA markers with the killer. This method could uncover not only the killer but also details about their ancestors and relatives. However, Ben warned John that this technique bordered on ethical and legal gray areas, as it involved accessing private genetic data, which could lead to privacy violations. Knowing the risk, John chose to proceed in secret, as he believed this was the only way to solve the case. However, his actions caught the attention of a reporter named Maria. Maria, who had covered the case 16 years ago, learned that John had hired Ben for DNA mapping, an illegal practice without proper authorization. Smelling a sensational story, she confronted John, asking questions and seeking confirmation for her headline. Initially, John denied everything, but he soon realized that Maria could jeopardize the entire investigation if she exposed it prematurely. Determined to protect the case, John met Maria again and said, "We're very close to catching the killer. Just give me a little more time. Once we've caught them, you'll be the first to get an exclusive interview. But if you publish anything now, everything we've worked for could fall apart." Skeptical, Maria replied, "Why should I trust you? How can I be sure you'll give me the first interview?" John looked her in the eye and said, "I promise. You know I keep my promises. 16 years ago, I promised Adnan's parents I'd find their son's killer, and I've never stopped chasing them. You'll get your story, but please, wait until we finish this." Moved by his determination and sincerity, Maria agreed to hold off, trusting John's word. The stakes were higher than ever, and John knew this might be his last chance to bring the killer to justice. The story now intensifies as Ben's DNA mapping brings him startlingly close to identifying the killer. His research reveals that the killer is indeed a resident of the same city. Meanwhile, Maria discovers this breakthrough and becomes determined to secure an exclusive interview with Ben. Although Ben initially refuses, John persuades him to agree, but Ben sets a condition. He will take Maria's DNA sample before granting the interview. Maria reluctantly agrees, and after her DNA sample is collected, she proceeds with the interview. Meanwhile, Marcus, the football coach, finally decides to come clean after 16 years. Feeling guilty, he visits the police station and tells John, "There was a boy named Antti in our football team who refused to give his DNA sample back then. I have a suspicion he might be involved in the double murder." The police waste no time and head to Antti's current residence. However, when they test his DNA, it doesn't match the killer's, ruling him out as a suspect. Disappointed but undeterred, John turns back to Ben's ongoing investigation. Ben, while analyzing Maria's DNA sample, makes a shocking discovery. He runs the test multiple times to ensure accuracy. Eventually, two names surface, David and Stephen, both members of Maria's extended family. Ben is astounded and immediately contacts John to share the news. "John," Ben says, "I've identified two potential suspects. Their names are David and Stephen. They're Maria's cousins, and one of them is the killer." John informs his senior officers and requests arrest warrants for both suspects. Among the two, suspicion falls more heavily on David, as he lives alone and fits the profile. Stephen, on the other hand, is married with children, making him seem less likely to be involved. Consequently, the senior officers issue a warrant for David's arrest first. Somehow, Maria learns of this development once again and confronts John, eager for details. "We're close to catching the killer," John tells her. "Once we've arrested them, you'll get your exclusive interview." Maria presses for more information, asking, "There has to be something you can share right now. Just a small detail?" John hesitates but then says, "Maria, we're only able to catch this killer because of you. Without your DNA sample, this wouldn't have been possible." Maria, puzzled and overwhelmed by his statement, tries to make sense of it. Unbeknownst to her, the case is about to take an even more personal and dramatic turn. As time came, the police stormed David's house and arrested him. Finally, after 16 long years, the DNA sample confirmed that David was indeed the killer. Upon hearing the news, John was overwhelmed with relief and satisfaction. He had finally found the man responsible for Adnan and Gunilla's murders. John had a lot of questions for David. His first question was direct. "Did you kill Adnan and Gunilla?" David replied coldly, "Yes, I killed them." John pressed further, "Why did you do it?" David's answer was unsettling. "I needed just two people. Only by killing two people could I find peace." Shocked, John asked, "Who told you this?" David pointed to his head and said, My mind told me. It became clear that David was a mentally unstable individual, driven by his delusions to commit such heinous acts. The most shocking revelation was that David had been living in the same area all along. He rarely left his house, which is why no one ever suspected him. Without Ben's help and the DNA mapping technique, the case might never have been solved. With the case closed, John first visited Gunilla's husband to deliver the news. "We've caught the person who took your wife's life," he said. Though it wouldn't bring Gunilla back, it gave her husband a sense of closure. Next, John called Adnan's father to share the breakthrough. Adnan's parents were relieved to hear the news, and John later visited their home to meet them. There, he learned something heartwarming. Adnan's parents had a daughter after his passing and named her Gunilla in honor of the woman who had tried to save Adnan's life. Adnan's parents thanked John with tears in their eyes. "You've done something incredible," they said. "We know what it cost you." After the case was solved, Ben returned to his life, his role in the investigation complete. As for John, he finally returned to his son Henry and began rebuilding his relationship with him, dedicating time to the family he had nearly lost. And so, this story concludes with justice served, lives forever changed, and a poignant reminder of the cost of pursuing the truth.